Thoreau is one of the most popular, well-known transcendentalists, and his insights from Walden are some of the pillars of transcendental literature that we look at. He performed the Walden experiment, where he went and lived on Walden Farm by himself off the land, and basically everything he did, as he talks about in the text, he did through his own work. He did this for about 2 years, which is really a long time to do anything. So it's important for us to understand while we're reading his insights here, these aren't just academic insights, these are actually insights that he has through experience. I want to go over some of the main insights that he tells us about in chapter 2, which is, I'd say, probably the most popular chapter of the book. It's often the most examined at college level and high school level and things like that. Now, towards the beginning of the chapter, he has kind of a humorous discussion about shopping. And this is shopping that's more of a mental exercise, less of a purchase with money. It seems like he's talking about purchases that are purely mental purchases. But it's important to point out that these mental purchases are just as enjoyable and just as property gaining as actual money purchase. Thoreau actually shows that his ability to mentally enjoy a piece of property is just as important, if not more so, than actually putting down money for it. There's that humorous exchange where he buys a farm, he negotiates the purchase of a farm with less than 10 cents in his pocket, and the gentleman, his wife changes her mind after the gentleman's already sold it to Thoreau, who has no money. And so the gentleman offers Thoreau $10 if he'll give the gentleman back his farm. And so Thoreau is able to say, no, you can have the farm back. I won't charge you $10 for it. And of course Thoreau says that they were both better for it and none the poorer. So basically there's some good humor here. I think that Thoreau is very good at having some very nice academic insight that's very, very, it's made more appealing by some of the entertaining and humorous tones that he's able to have with it. The bottom line, though, is possession. The idea of possession. For Thoreau, true possession is a mental possession, not just paying money for something. You can pay money for something, but later on he talks about how ownership of possessions monetarily can actually, the property starts to take possession of you rather than you having possession of it. There's another part he talks about the poet ability to be a thief, how a poet such as himself would be able to take the best of whatever the poet writes about. And Walden talks about his decision to immortalize a farm, and that he, to quote, he says, impounded it, milked it, skimmed it, and gotten all the cream, and left the farmer only the skimmed milk. So here this is, again, going back to possession and ownership, that the poet has the ability to mentally claim the best of something and leave behind the husk of what's left. So that's pretty powerful insight to the abilities of poets and scholars and such. Now, something that's very important for for Thoreau, also for Emerson, but especially for Thoreau here, he talks about is the importance of seclusion. And he talks about how seclusion is necessary to where humanity can start to hear itself. If you are not in seclusion, if you're around a crowd, then it's, Thoreau points out, it's hard to think for yourself because you're surrounded by so many. So one of the most appealing things about Walden Farm that was so attractive to Thoreau was the seclusion that it offered, and he felt like this was somewhere he could go and have true insight that was his own insight, because it wouldn't be tainted at all by any crowds or any other influence. There's a few times in here where he mentions he emphasizes the seclusion by talking about his only neighbors are the birds. Another thing I really want to point out is just the ability that Thoreau has. We've already talked about the humor that he's able to use, but also just the pure poetry that he's able to achieve. There are some lines in here that are just beautiful lines, the way he describes his experience and his insight. For example, the following insight he writes down, and just the way he says it, it's quite captivating for us, the audience. I saw it throwing off its nightly clothing of mist, and here and there, by degrees, its soft ripples, or its smooth reflecting surface was revealed, while the mist, like ghosts, were stealthily withdrawing in every direction into the woods, and as the breaking up of some nocturnal conventicle. The imagery in that is so powerful that, again, the insights that Thoreau is presenting here, I think they're much more effective in the way he's able to achieve these insights because of their entertainment value. Not only the humor, but just the language and the beautiful imagery that he's able to use. Now, we get a little insight into the daily life that Thoreau has on Walden Farm during his 2 years. And I think it's interesting that we get a little bit of a hint of the religion that Thoreau has on the farm. It's not the conventional religion. His church isn't the conventional church as far as where you go with the group and you sing your psalm and actually indoors. For Thoreau, his religious ritual every day is his morning bath. And I think it's very important that we look at this bath. It's kind of funny to think of this guy every day going out, and the bath is the most important part of his day, it seems. But this is really kind of a spiritual moment for him. He's a part of nature. He's reflecting. This is going to be very important, very representative of the transcendental idea of religion that's much more of a spiritual focus rather than a religious focus. The church isn't a building, the church is the pond that he's in that allows him to be more at one with nature and therefore at one with God, since for the transcendentalist, God would be found in nature. Another part that is important about his morning ritual of bathing is he talks about the importance of just the morning itself. And this is something that may be difficult for some of us to appreciate. But for Thoreau, the mornings are a necessary time for the scholar to be awake and aware. He really does emphasize the importance of mornings. And this is, something that some of us may need to practice a little bit to enjoy more of. But for Thoreau, really the best part of the day is the morning time. He talks about the necessity of wanting to be awake in life. He says a line that's a very powerful line. He says, "To be awake is to be alive." And this idea of awakeness, it's important because, some of us have gotten up early, but we're not truly awake. I've had many a day where even though I may be awake at 5 o'clock in the morning, mentally I'm still slumbering. And so Thoreau really does clarify that awake is more than just a physical state. Awake, he means mentally awake, mentally alert. He means that your mind is working and absorbing what it needs to do early in the morning, that you are awake both physically as well as mentally. And so part 2 of this video will pick up more on some of the ideas of being mentally awake and other ideas that Thoreau presents in this chapter of Walden.